Last Monday, our Foreign Affairs Minister, Chrystia Freeland, attended an event in Toronto which identified tyrants in the world. Donald Trump made the grade. Well, I had an opportunity to speak with Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, former U.S. Navy Lieutenant Commander, very staunch conservative in the United States, about how American conservatives feel about that. So here's what ran in the Daily Caller the other day in the U.S. Canadian Foreign Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland participated in a panel discussion Monday in Toronto that compared President Donald Trump to world dictators. Freeland joined New York journalist Masha Gessen and Indigo CEO Heather Reisman at the Taking on the Tyrant forum to discuss, quote, the rise of the autocrats who use fear, who use corruption, who use anti-immigration sentiment to crack down on free press and rule of law to undermine democracy, end quote. Freeland is the lead negotiator in Canada's stalled talks with the United States for a renegotiated NAFTA. In an online video, Trump is depicted as a tyrant, undermining democracy, along with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, Turkish President Recep Erdogan, Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte, Russian President Vladimir Putin, and Chinese President Xi Jinping. So this was the day before, the night before, the evening before, Chrystia Freeland was heading back to Washington to lead the Canadian delegation in trade talks with the United States. So tyrants, and even though they didn't mention Donald Trump by name, he was part of the discussion because, well, his picture appeared. So, and, you know, when people talk about tyrants today, on the left, they're often talking about Donald Trump. So Michelle Rempel, who's the immigration critic for the Conservative Party of Canada, tweeted, there are a lot of people's jobs riding on Freeland and Trudeau getting a deal on NAFTA. It requires strength, shrewdness, persistence, and diplomacy to get it done. None of that here. I mean, even the U.S. president hasn't gone as far as to attend an anti-Trudeau event. Well, joining us on the program, he's a good friend of ours, good friend of the programs, is Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, former U.S. Navy Lieutenant Commander, founder of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. He's the author of an excellent book, Battle for the Soul of Islam, and past president of the Arizona Medical Association. American conservative, also radio talk show host. Zuhdi, I just have to get the response from you to that story about our chief negotiator for a trade deal with the United States engaging in an evening about tyrants, and, you know, Donald Trump was definitely part of the equation. How's that going over in the U.S.?
Well, you know, Roy, it basically is proving again how out of touch the left is and how much in a bubble they're living. I mean, yes, she got the Diplomat of the Year from foreignpolicy.com. And meanwhile, the rest of America, sure, they may have some problems with some of President Trump's visceral reactions. And, you know, the bottom line is he's a successful businessman from New York who is a brass knuckles kind of guy. And he's trying to get good deals with Canada, better deals, if you will, to help the American taxpayer. And ultimately, that's free market, that's capitalism. And unfortunately, from the top down in Canada, the left is, and I'll tell you, as a Syrian American, there's nothing more offensive than to compare any Western leader, let alone my president, to Bashar al-Assad, who has been committing genocide, to the Chinese president, who has been massacring Uyghur Muslims. I mean, on and on. Do words mean nothing? And that's really what the left has been falling prey to, is their words now have become meaningless, and which makes them completely ineffective. And I think outside the bubble in Washington, which is the elitist establishment that is completely out of touch, I think regular America is looking and saying, you know, in the past 2 years, we're doing a lot better economically than we ever were under Obama. And I think the left in Canada is starting to see, as a result of the success of Max Bernier and others, that they're also going to be on their heels.
You know, if you're the lead negotiator for a new trade deal with the United States, and it's a little touch and go on what's going to happen, and, you know, you have a president, a U.S. president, who is prone to react and respond and do it publicly, why go and tweak the man the day before you go back to negotiations, particularly when the U.S. has a deal with Mexico, and Mexico's made it fairly clear they don't have Canada's back. They got their own back. They take care of themselves, and I don't blame them. The night before you go back to negotiate, you attend an evening like this and you speak at it. It's, as you said, it's offensive to you. It's your president, and you also have history in Syria and still have family in Syria who've been affected by a murderous tyrant, Bashar al-Assad.
It really is. I think, not only why do they do this? Why M103? Why? Give millions to former terrorists. Why not vet refugees? Why all the appeasement? On and on. The left does not seem to learn the lesson, and I think they're going to lose elections when they realize that their visceral response of disgust for conservatives that have beat them in the ballot box is going to give way not to a blue wave, as they're talking about in November, but rather to even further losses. And I think, unfortunately, the establishment between the left in America and in Canada are very close and seem to be blinded by their hate for President Trump instead of looking at exactly what's best for Canadian citizens. They have no discipline. I mean, here's the lead, like you said, the lead trade negotiator, and she has absolutely no discipline in holding back what are visceral things she wants to say as she approaches the deadline of the end of September for this negotiation.
And this is about Canadian jobs. This is about the Canadian economy. This is about trade relations with our most significant trading partner. I know that there are individual states, that will do everything they possibly can to not have their trade interrupted with Canada. We get all of that. But there's a fundamental responsibility when you're representing the people, and that's to do it responsibly. But there's a feeling in Canada, Zuhdi, as well, that in the U.S., they haven't got a clue what we're doing in Canada. Couldn't care less. Americans don't ever take note of us. Well, you could do whatever you want. It'll never cause any ripples. It'll never be noted in Washington. How true or how false is that?
Well, I think ultimately, as we renegotiate this deal, America's paying attention. And they have our attention now coming to the end of this month. So if ever there was a time that Americans were paying attention to Canada, it's now. And to see, their trade negotiator obsessing about bizarre comparisons of President Trump to tyrants and ignoring some of the reality of the compromise that needs to happen with the dairy issue and other things is just bizarre.
It is bizarre. It's absolutely bizarre. And I wonder, I have to wonder if it's a strategy. And if it's a strategy, then we're going to come out on the losing end. Zuhdi, it's always great speaking with you. I just wanted to get your sense, and I appreciate you coming on. Thanks so very much.
Anytime. Thanks for having me, Roy.
All the best. Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. If you want to hear more, subscribe to The Roy Green Show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you find your favorites. And if you like what you hear, leave us a review and tell a friend. I'm Roy Green. Have a great weekend.